come once again to discuss things.
Let's do it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
Hey, what's up? I'm that Mac Kid.
And now I'm Steve.
And Steve. So Steve picked our review topic this evening. Steve, what did you choose for us?
Alright, so today I picked the DareDevil miniseries by Brian Michael Bendis and David Mack from 2013, I want to say. Daredevil End of Days, which chronicles essentially the investigation into Daredevil's last words as he is murdered in the opening pages of this book.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, I guess I'll just do it. Man, fucking Marvel books, am I right? No, I'm kidding. I did quite enjoy this. I did quite enjoy this.
Okay, good. I was gonna say, because no, Daredevil End of Days is one of the best Marvel comics of the last decade.
And you hate to see it. No, I mean I just gotta be shitty. No lie, Steve, you've told me that every Daredevil run is great until the Hand shows up, and I'm like, man, all right, here we go. We're getting into some Marvel stuff. It's getting past that 6-issue mark, and it's still looking good. End of issue 6, the Hand. I'm like, oh no.
That's ridiculous. I can't believe that's at issue 6 here. That's ridiculous.
For those not to know, my argument is Marvel is great for the first 6 issues, and then they don't know what to do with the series after issue number 6. This makes it to 8 issues, so I guess I've been proven #wrong, but I mean, just come on, what are the chances?
So I want to go into just setting the scene here a little bit before we get full swing into what this book is and what everyone thought and everything. So Alfie and I talk about Daredevil over on my channel. We've been reviewing the Chip Zdarsky run on Daredevil, which is the one that's going on currently. This book came out in, I think, 2013. It was a mini-series that was actually long overdue and had been in production since 2005, 2006. Essentially ever since Brian Michael Bendis left the Daredevil ongoing title, he's been saying he's been working on this, and it only actually came out in 2013. Originally, it was supposed to be part of the actual Marvel The End line, which they don't make anymore, but essentially what that was is that every character had a The End story, which was here's the story about their last days. It wasn't exactly this. It wasn't they've already died and we're figuring out the world after them. It was specifically here's the last days of the Hulk, here are the last days of Iron Man, all that stuff. And originally it was supposed to be a 6-issue miniseries in that vein with 2 oversized issues. And then they just kept hitting delays and delays and delays because Bendis was writing everything at Marvel at that point. And eventually this came out, and it came out in the middle of Mark Waid's run on Daredevil. And this book is interesting because it's, one, a very, very sharp contrast to what Mark Waid was doing at the time, which was itself a very sharp contrast from what Daredevil was up to for that whole decade. And because it's also such a conglomeration of all the talent on Daredevil for this era. So Mark Waid comes on to Daredevil in 2011, and he goes back to what's essentially considered the poor man's Spider-Man approach, because Daredevil was originally just a Spider-Man ripoff. He dresses in red, he hangs out in New York, he's quippy and he's funny and he's charming. And he was the boring B-list, C-list character that you read if you weren't cool enough to read Spider-Man, essentially. And then Frank Miller comes along, reinvents him, makes him this perfect hard-boiled superhero in his words. And Mark Waid, instead of doing the hard-boiled superhero, brings him back to the poor man Spider-Man. He breaks him quippy. He makes him more optimistic. He says that Daredevil's history has been very depressing, so let's make a run about Daredevil getting over his depression. And in the midst of like this very, very fun, bright, vibrant series about Daredevil just like, fucking chilling with Ant-Man and going on adventures around the world and fighting Doctor Doom, this book drops, and it's back to that old school vein of Daredevil that Bendis was writing, where it just gets progressively more and more depressing as it goes along. Daredevil does not have a happy life. The end of Bendis's run is Matt Murdock thrown in jail. The end of the Kevin Smith run is Karen Page being killed by Bullseye in Daredevil's arms. The most famous thing Frank Miller ever did is murder Elektra, and then her wobbling herself to Matt Murdock's door and dying in his arms. Like, Matt does not have a good life. And End of Days is, at the time it came out, a return to that. And it's got not only Bendis, who is the best Daredevil writer of all time, it's got David Mack, who was an artist for an arc on Bendis' run and did his own arc. It's got Klaus Janson, who's of course famous for Dark Knight Returns, but also had a stint on Daredevil with Frank Miller. Bill Ziewanski, I don't know how to say his name, I'm sorry. He's another like really, really great Daredevil artist from the 80s and 90s. And then Alex Maleev, who was Bendis' artist for his run. So this is basically like all-star Daredevil, if we're going to use DC terms.
And it's not even about Daredevil, it's about Ben Urich.
Well, that's why it's about Daredevil. It's about Daredevil through Ben Urich.
No, I mean, it's really interesting to get a story where like the title character dies in the first couple pages of the first issue. And it's a fun enough premise because Mapone, and they make the joke very early on. It's like maybe it's the name of a sled that he had. And I quite like that
Great.
he can't help but acknowledge the kind of. I mean, it's hard not to call it the source or the inspiration for the story, because like that's such a particular thing from Citizen Kane that it's hard not to just say this is doing a Citizen Kane. That needs to be a new fucking genre of story. Like, how everything does like a It's a Wonderful Life episode? Everything needs to do a Citizen Kane episode. Where someone dies and they say one word and then the whole thing is just them figuring out what that one word was in reference to. But yeah, so it's an interesting enough premise. Steve sent this to me as like a Christmas gift or something. I can't quite recall the context for it, but I got it and I was like, all right, yeah, Steve, he likes Daredevil. I'll read this. And I'm like, the fuck is going on in this book? So as the not Daredevil stan in this call, I will say it's a very good book, and it's not exactly hard to get into if you have like just a general knowledge of Marvel, like I do. Freaking Daredevil's in Hell's Kitchen. He's beats up the Kingpin, and Punisher and him have a weird relationship. He's got a bunch of weird villains and stuff. I knew who Ben Urich was too. So I'm like, within that context, I didn't find it at all like confusing. Like, I didn't know what was going on or who these people were or what their significance was. But at the same time, I don't think it's like a good starter for Daredevil like it was for me. I'm not sure if I've read like a standalone Daredevil story outside of this. And was it Mark Waid writing Daredevil? No, who was it? It was Soul. I read like the tail end of Soul's run on Daredevil and didn't much care for it sometimes. Soul's a weird writer. But I don't know, like I don't think I could recommend it as like a baby's first Daredevil. Matt, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in kind of the same boat in terms of my background. Like with Daredevil, I've, he popped up in the Spider-Man cartoon. I saw the Ben Affleck movie. I've seen season 1 of the Netflix show. that's about it. And I've read like little bits and pieces here and there. So I really don't know much about Daredevil. So there were definitely moments where I was kind of thrown, like when Ben Urich goes to meet the Owl, or when he goes to meet the actress formerly known as Typhoid Mary. Like, I don't know who these people are. I have no history with these characters. But I did find, you know, Bendis is an author that I generally enjoy. And I found that sort of how much I enjoyed Urich in this book helped me carry through those moments. So even though Ben would be talking to characters that I'm not familiar with or that I don't have a history with, I found viewing them through the eyes of this character that I was getting to know and really starting to enjoy in this book was very effective at carrying that. And it was also kind of cool. Like, I don't really know general Marvel all that much. And so one thing that I thought was really cool in this book is that pretty much any mention of other Marvel characters is always in like a past tense, or like they're not around, or we're having trouble getting contact with them. So for me, not really knowing a lot of those characters, it kind of was this cool, like, this isn't just the end of days for Daredevil. This feels like the end of the glory days of this universe that Daredevil lives in. And so to see that was really cool, especially as someone who doesn't really know a lot of what's going on with DC or with Marvel. So when he's talking about like Avengers Disassembled, I'm like, I don't fucking know what that is, but it does create kind of an atmosphere, and it does really kind of give you a sense of just how fucked up things have gotten in the Marvel universe at this point. So I think it all
got
works.
Such a kick out of, like, you know, we shouldn't have called this End of Days. This book should have been called Daredevil. That was years ago. The number of times they say that shit, man.
I do love that. I mean, it's this emphasis on like the glory days of Daredevil are behind him, and I think that carries over to just the rest of the Marvel universe in this book. You know, the glory days of Marvel as a world of superheroes is like over and done with, and now you just have this shitty world where Thor is fucking advertising insurance and they have a Hulk musical, and I'm just like, that's really fucking cool, and I like that. So I really latched onto all that stuff pretty hard.
Okay, I'm flipping through the issue. I just want to say, Alfie, it wasn't issue 6 that the hand shows up. It's issue 7, so it's like literally at the point where,
if it was
like,
issue 6, after we had that conversation, I actually would have like thought we'd been watched. like someone is tapping us. Like,
no, it's usually 6 good issues, and then issue 7 it starts going downhill. Like that's how it works, man. I'm telling you. That's my Marvel thing, and I'm sticking to it. Bendis did the smart move, and he wrapped it up 2 issues later. You know, it's like, oh shit, I wanted this to go on for a while, but fuck. I hit issue 6 already. I spent all my good points.
Technically, what this is it's not even, and it probably why I really like it, and why I think Steve really likes it as well, and why it's still a strong, story. Like, again, like you and Matt aren't as familiar with the general Daredevil lore, like general Daredevil like storylines. It's still a good story, but why it's best enjoyed in its actual context is this isn't issue 1 to 8. This is issue 51 to 58 of Bendis's run. Like, this is in the same way that with the most recent example, where Tom King has basically said that Batcat is fulfilling the end of his Batman run that he didn't get to do in the book proper, but it's effectively meant to be read as like the epilogue to that. This is the epilogue to the Bendis run. The Bendis run ends on a cliffhanger. So it makes sense that to do like a complete final statement on Daredevil, you'd want to jump ahead far past that. You'd want to jump ahead to like, in interviews, Bendis obviously brings up like the Dark Knight Returns for like the idea of like, how do we end this character's story? How do we? Alan Moore is probably the one who more often kind of goes for this is that like the reason why comic book characters can't be seen as mythic or legends is because they don't have endings. They're perpetually in a second act. There is no conclusion for the tale to be told. So there is like a desire to end these characters and to do like a final story of a writer who's defined them for so much. So I think Bendis getting the chance to do that with Daredevil makes a lot of sense, especially because he's a character that he's a lot more popular now. But at the time, you could make an argument like outside of the other Marvel Universe shit. I think it's a little bit too playing with other people's toys that prevent it. But like, if this was just the Daredevil core cast, you could probably make this canon and get away with it because Matt Murdock's not a character that's too big to kill off, especially when this was coming out. He was again, like, to put generously like a B-list character on his best days. He's always kind of been like the indie Marvel book, the one where the writers get to do all these great stories because no one really gives a shit in like the editors aren't watching you, like what you're doing. So you get to take these massive risks and do these things because no one really cares what Daredevil's doing. So like, the strength of that gives this like a legitimacy and like a real like mystery to where you can go, because again, there's a freedom to just do whatever you want, to feature all these different characters and have them be in places that make sense they'd end up, with the through line of something that's incredible and probably my favorite gag in all of comics is the many children of Matt Murdock.
Yep.
I legitimately think it's the funniest because I don't know what it is, but like, we always make it just a joke like Daredevil is hornhead. He's fucked every single woman in the Marvel universe at some point, and like he's a Catholic, so he doesn't believe in protection. So it makes sense that if you want to do jump ahead, oh look, little redhead Matt over here. Oh look, little redhead, and then finally you get like everything. Like, so it's such a good hook to keep it light. And this book has moments of humor, and this book has moments of like high-flying superhero-dom. It's not inherently trying to be realistic to make it our world. I think what this book does best is it's a realistic depiction of the Marvel universe 10 to 20 years from now. Go ahead, Steve.
I was just gonna leap off of that point. I think, and you and I have talked about this before, Daredevil is the quintessential Marvel character. You want to explain Marvel Comics to somebody, you basically have to explain Daredevil to them. And even if you're not familiar with them and you explain any other character, chances are you'll have a better chance convincing them if you explain Daredevil. Because the difference between Marvel and DC on a variety of things are, one, Marvel tends to hire young writers and artists that are just making their name for cheap to do definitive runs on people, and then they get sent over to DC when they become like all-star artists and writers. And so you see a lot of people get their start and make their name on a certain kind of book at Marvel before they get famous over at DC. Certain exceptions apply here, but Daredevil kind of works the same way, where Frank Miller becomes Frank Miller on Daredevil. Bendis becomes Bendis on Daredevil. Even like to an extent, some of the later like bad stuff, like Andy Diggle's like real first like I'm gonna try and do something big with a comic book, in a mainstream comic book, was his terrible Daredevil run. Ed Brubaker similarly had his big Cap run and had his big Daredevil run, and then later all of them graduated out and did other things that brought them more money. And then the other thing is, Marvel tends to have more run-focused, continuity-heavy characters that live and die in long status quos, versus DC, where you have like certain 2 or 3 like seminal stories for them. To explain why Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man sucks and why he's not Iron Man, I can't just give you like All-Star Iron Man or Iron Man Year One. I have to give you issues like 150 to like 208 of Dennis O'Neil's run. I have to give you like
and this
the
is why Marvel
entirety
is
of Matt
trash.
Fraction's Invincible Iron Man plus the relaunch. Like, that's just how Marvel books tend to work for some reason.
I hate it.
And and I love it. I grew up on that shit. That makes me happy when I have to read a run. And Daredevil is this way, where Daredevil has like one or two like really good like one-shot stories. You have Born Again, you have Man Without Fear, and you've got End of Days now. But to get Daredevil to like really like be a Daredevil fan, the only way to do it is to like sit down and read an entire writer's 50-issue run, whether it's Bendis, Brubaker, Zdarsky, Wade, Miller, like or any of the many runs that are not in trade. And so you get like a really sort of general sense of how Marvel does business. But then on top of that, you also get the things that are important to Marvel stories. Daredevil has always been the testing ground to be ahead of the curve on where things are going. Matt Fraction, Hawkeye makes sense after you see what Wade was doing with Daredevil. The sort of darker, grittier turn of the Marvel comics of the 80s makes sense after you see what Frank Miller was doing with Daredevil. Bendis taking over Marvel makes sense after you read Daredevil. And I remember when Ian and I were talking one day about Bendis on Superman, and predicting every plot beat of what Bendis was going to do on Superman starts with understanding what he did on Daredevil. And it's kind of funny to me that Daredevil just becomes like this. No one reads Daredevil. You can hardly buy Daredevil in print. Even the current run is out of print and it's going on right now. So no one fucking reads Daredevil. It's not like it's a top-selling book or anything. But it's always the book at Marvel that explains Marvel.
Neat.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation of why it's so hard to find these kind of one-off stuff like this. Where again, like Dark Knight Returns is something you can pick and hand to anyone. For many people, it's their first Batman story, and the advantage of that becomes is like everyone knows who Batman and Superman is. Everyone knows who Robin is. Even if people don't know Green Arrow, you don't need to know who Green Arrow is in that story to understand what it is, kind of thing. Like you just go with the premise that this is Adam West, age 50, go, and that's what made it so big. And DC's kind of made its bread and butter on that. Whereas Marvel, which has always been one continuity, which has always been this one long. There's a book coming out called All of the Marvels, which is by a guy who's like read every single Marvel comic and has made a narrative out of it, and is making the argument that the Marvel universe is the longest running published fictional work of all time. Like when you put it like that, because it's all one story. Like, every book technically is meant to be one uninterrupted story from the very first issue of Fantastic Four to now. Even going further back to the very first issue of Marvel with the Human Torch. So like it's very different in that sense than DC, where when you do these out of continuity things, they almost have to still be in continuity to like, because you can't separate it from it. It's like people have tried and it's never really taken off. So I think that's something where you have to kind of roll with it.
I just think it's so funny that Marvel was like, yeah, let's try and do something that's a little more accessible, because our stories are just, they go on for fucking ever. So let's do like the Ultimate universe. Okay, yeah, this is going pretty well. You know what'd be cool? Let's merge it together with the main universe so it's completely inaccessible.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, now let's just completely forget we ever did that. 'Cause that's like a perfect example of literally the gravity of Marvel warps everything else that has to fit into the same singular thing eventually, right? Whereas DC is much more a branching pathway. Marvel's much more like one giant oak tree.
And I think that's because Marvel was like always designed to be a universe, and, to one extent or another, but like Stan Lee was always planning to have these characters interact in some way, shape, or form. And the other artists helping him out and stuff. Like, that's the thing I think Stan Lee should take more credit for, is he was the driving force in bringing a lot of the characters together in a way that I don't think other people were. But yeah, I don't know, it's a weird fucking universe. Like,
what I want to say about that, though, again, if you're like having the I guess like to go to like characters for a second. What did you guys think of the guy who's kind of your tour guide then to the Marvel Universe? What did we think of our Ben Urich, our protagonist for the majority of this book?
I mean, I certainly liked him as someone who is not familiar with this character. I like Ben Urich has shown up in like things that I've seen. I'm sure, but he has this like kind of cynical, tired of everything edge to him, and we're kind of seeing the dirtiness of what the Marvel Heroes universe has become through his eyes because he's seen so much of the worst of it. And like I kind of said before, he really did carry me through the book in moments when I had no clue what the fuck was happening, because I did find myself ultimately invested in the story of him trying to piece together this mystery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much the same. I quite liked him as a character, and I think Ben Urich's just got kind of that comic book coolness to him, I guess. There's really not like a good way to say it. He's like just one of those recognizable faces in comics that I really enjoy seeing characters like that. Just that cast of character kind of thing. So it was cool seeing him, and he's definitely got like a sympathetic voice and an interest, and Bendis writes him really well, I think. He, again, you know, you have the context of like the Frank Miller hard-boiled detective kind of pulp adventure kind of thing that Daredevil did, and Ben Urich fits that mold really well, fits into that world really well. As like the gritty reporter who will do anything for a scoop, and he's always got a story, and like I like his introduction quite a bit where he's like, listen, I know exactly what they're gonna say, and you just get like a whole page of people saying, nope, I didn't see shit. or some variation thereon, or yeah, I saw something, how much you paying? I'll say anything. Like I really like that. He's you know, no nonsense. This guy's seen it all. This guy's, you know, done stories on like dead children and stuff. He's been through the shit. And so it made him just a very credible voice, and it was really interesting just seeing him kind of go through this world and unravel all of this stuff, and like when he can't seem to get any information, and then he just says the word Mapone. And it's like the whole mood shifts every time he says it, and I love it. I think that's my favorite thing, is just he'll say it, and then just everyone looks at him differently. Like they're finally going to be the one to know, and none of them do. Like Frank Castle's the only one who claims to, and I think in the end even he didn't actually know, but he knew the reasoning behind it enough. Oh, I don't know. Frank Castle and Natasha always got some weird fucking dynamic I never know how to explain, so maybe I'm wrong. You guys remember the anime Avengers Black Ops movie with fucking Frank Castle and Black Widow?
I remember. I never saw her.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Okay. But have any of the Marvel animes been good?
I don't know. There's one with the X-Men I really want to watch, but it's probably terrible. Just like I remember seeing a clip from it where like Beast is like teaching a class, and he's like explaining how he fucking like grew life for this weird like tentacle squid kind of fucking thing that he's got in a tank in his class. And he goes, and unfortunately I'm really busy today, so this thing that I made will be teaching the class for the rest of the day. And then he just like fucking leaves the room, and the thing's like, alright students, turn to page 32 in your textbooks. And I just want to watch the fucking movie for that, but I have never been able to find it anywhere. Sorry.
So yeah, Ben Urich is fantastic. Alfie, you and I mentioned this before. He's sort of disappeared from the Marvel universe the last 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like, it feels like this entire bit is a little. Reading this book is like a bit of a time capsule. Do you think, Steve? Because this Marvel doesn't read like this anymore.
Well, that's the really funny thing, is that like Bendis is writing a Daredevil story while another Daredevil story is going on that is nothing like this, and this is like 10 years out of step with that, which I don't mind. I still love it. If either of you go back and read Bendis's initial run on Daredevil, Ben Urich is the central character through that also. The first story arc is actually the story about Tim, who grows up and becomes Daredevil in this. It's essentially a story about this little kid who was traumatized because he saw something, and Ben wants to know what it is, so he goes and like hangs out with and interviews this kid for like 5 issues. And it's essentially like this kid, his dad was a supervillain and ends up dying, and he like sees like this big great superhero battle between them and like romanticizes it, and it traumatizes him as a kid. And that's where the run opens. And then Bendis goes on and essentially tells Matt Murdock's story through Ben Urich's eyes about 90% of the time. Even the like sort of big heel turn revelation of that run, which is Matt has been doing everything because ever since Karen Page died, he had a nervous breakdown. That reveal is entirely from the perspective of Ben Urich is retracing Matt's steps as he was doing something, finds him, and then asks him this question. And Matt says nothing, and you realize what happened through Ben Urich's reporting on it, which is really, really fucking cool. And I wish we would go back to this, because Ben is probably Matt's best side character. Like, Foggy's great. Everyone loves Foggy. Everyone loves
giving
Page.
Foggy
Everyone loves...
cancer.
Yeah, fucking Foggy cancer. Like, Daredevil's got a great, like, a set of consistent side characters that he hangs out with. But I don't think anyone is quite as cool as Ben Urich, because he's not a Gordon ripoff. He's not a Lois Lane ripoff. He's very much his own amalgamation of real-world, weary journalist who isn't so inside of his own head that you lose focus on what he's talking about. And he's always like a really good vehicle for what's the state of the world. And there's that great moment in issue 4 or 5 where you find Bullseye, and it's like a fucking scene out of a David Fincher movie where they're just like looking around and figuring out the crime scene, and there's that perfect silent page where Ben just like points to all of the breakages in the wall and deduces that that Bullseye trick shotted himself into suicide. Which is just ridiculous and exactly what Bullseye would do. I miss Ben Urich. I wish he was hanging out at the Bugle with Robbie and Peter and Jonah. I wish he was talking to Matt and figuring out his life more. Ben Urich's life is as fucked up and tragic as Matt's, but I think the difference is it rolls off of Ben's shoulders just a little bit more. Like, he gets more tired, but he never like loses his resolve. He just keeps doing the thing because he just, at some, I think, intrinsic level, assumes he's going to die doing this thing, and he's kind of okay with that, and that makes him an interesting window into this world that just never gets better.
Well, I guess he does die doing this thing.
Well, he does in this, yeah. Gets shot by a fucking arrow.
Yeah, because the hand shows up.
Yeah, I think the interplay between what Ben is writing and what he's thinking, and the way he goes back and forth between those things, and the way he can sort of get into his own head and say, like, no, stop it. Matt left because he had to. He is still your friend. He didn't just abandon you for no reason. Like, the way he kind of gets in his own head and constantly corrects himself, and there's like a clear level of conflict inside of him, and it's just really cool. That back and forth between his writing and his thoughts is just one of the most entertaining parts of the book, for sure.
It's also just like legitimately good advice in certain situations where like he's saying something and then he'll say a thought and it'll cross it out. So he'll in issue 1 he's got that great moment where you start with the typewriter box and he talks about how he first met Daredevil. Then you cut to his thoughts and he's like, nope, start again. This isn't about you. This is about him. Facts. And then he changes his intro, and he just does that throughout the book where like he'll just like think a thing and it'll correct what he's writing because what he wrote before was actually bad.
Yeah.
It's just actual Bendis moments where he's just like, no, I don't like that actually. Why wouldn't Ben write it this way? And then he's just like, oh, that's why. Okay, so there you go.
Bendis actually has a book on writing comics that's really, really good. I would not be surprised if a lot of that Ben Urich-ness comes out in the fact that he's literally written about writing, and so he just enjoys writing a writer.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Connor Nielsen who's been on the show before who talked about how Bendis came and taught one of his college courses for a class, for a single session of class, I should say.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was Bendis. Yeah, I don't know. Bendis is an interesting beast. Like, I like him well enough anytime I read him. He doesn't wow me the same way he does you guys. Let me ask you this. When did you guys start reading Bendis' stuff? Like, as it was coming out, or shortly after, or like, what age?
I popped in... I don't know what age specifically off the top of my head, because what is in time at this point, but I can give you, like, when it was doing it. Is I popped onto Bendis when Ultimate Spider-Man got rebooted after Ultimatum, where it was still Peter, but it was, like, the lead-up to when Peter was gonna die. So that's when I jumped onto it, and then I went back and reread it all, and that was probably one of my first, if not the first Marvel comics I was going, and was Ultimate Spider-Man, because that was around the time, like the time of the New 52 and everything like that. So I got in with that, and it was here for. I really liked it, and Ultimate Spider-Man, especially the first initial portion of it, the first 50 issues or so, are just incredible, like fantastic work. So it was a really good introduction to him. But the first time that I really just fell in love with Bendis, and I still think this is easily, without question, the peak of their career, because I've enjoyed the Superman run as well, which apparently is such a hot take. But the Daredevil run is just like nothing else. Like, the Daredevil run is one of those things that when you read it, it's like no other comic experience you'll ever. It's you can't put it down. Like, it's nuts. Like, once you read it, you'll just read 50 issues. Like, it's incredible display of, like, how to craft a long ongoing story, but it's all one thing. But it never gets boring or never dull. It always changes itself up, but you never lose sight of it. So it's almost like a rarity. It's like a rare, like, Bendis is still always a really good writer, or like a competent writer, but then sometimes they phone it in when you can tell, and they get some stinkers. But like the Daredevil run is like, it's like they went super. It's like they were Ultra Instinct unlocked, and then they never came back. Like, it's pretty good. That's the one I'd universally recommend. But yeah, to answer the initial question, it was Ultimate Spider-Man after Ultimatum.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much same.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say pretty much same, minus I haven't read his Daredevil run, but I love his original Ultimate Spider-Man run.
Yeah, for me, I started with Bendis in 2006 or 7, when it was around the same time the Brubaker Cap and the Fraction Iron Man was going on. And I think it's the Ultimate Spider-Man arc with Silver Sable, because that's the one that ties into the video game. At least I think that's the one that ties into the video game. So I started with that, and then went to New Avengers, and really liked New Avengers, and then went back and read his Daredevil and his Alias. And Alias I really, really liked, but I mean, Alfie's not overselling it in that, like, his Daredevil is the best thing he's ever done. And it's an absolutely, like, transcendent experience where you sit down and you read these, like, really, really densely worded and plotted and intricately woven crime comics where you're cutting back and forth between the court cases about a superhero who accidentally kills someone, to the FBI investigating Matt Murdock for being Daredevil, to Matt having this nervous breakdown and beating the crap out of Wilson Fisk, ripping his mask off in public and being like, I'm the Kingpin now. And then, like, intercutting that with his, like, rushed relationship with Mila, and they get married, and how, like, every fucking time they step out the door, someone attacks Matt and she just gets traumatized by it. Someone like Typhoid Mary shows up and sets him on fire, literally on their second date. And, like, there's the great, like, turning point issue where Matt is essentially has taken over New York City, and Doctor Strange, Reed Richards, Iron Fist Spider-Man try to have an intervention, and he just blows them off. And then the Hand attacks, and he basically single-handedly takes them out. And Ben Urich finds him at the night nurse's little underground hospital after like getting all stitched up, and he just like asks him point blank, like, Matt, after Karen died, did you have a nervous breakdown? And he just cries, and the story keeps going, and it just keeps going worse and worse and worse until Matt fucking Murdock ends up in jail, and the last panel is him just like sitting on this bench inside of his jail cell for being the kingpin of New York, and the book's over. It's ridiculous. It's honestly in my 3 favorite comic book runs of all time. I'm not sure if Daredevil would be 1 or 2 for Pi Bendis. It's so fucking good.
I just ask because like it seems like you guys kind of got onto Bendis at like that, not necessarily that age, but like that point in comics fandom where you find who's going to be in like your tops, who's going to be the who's going to set your mood for the kinds of stories you like as you read and discover stuff. Because I think I was very much the same way with Johns. I think Bendis and Johns are about on that comparable level as far as impact at Marvel versus DC, you know? Not to compare their personal life, because it turns out Johns really sucks. Boo.
I get what you're saying. Like, the influences, they both were the
like, they were kind of the guy that was, like,
2000s.
on everything in their heyday, you know? Like, Johns was writing so much shit, like Flash, Green Lantern, fucking JSA, like, everything had John's name on it. Yeah. All that shit was John's for a good long while. And I think Bendis is the same way, where it's just, you know, like you have a hard time, I feel, getting it or getting the same impact that the people that adore it do after the fact, because you almost had to be there while it was happening, you know? You almost had to be involved with it as it was going in order to truly appreciate it and truly like comprehend the hype behind it at times. Not that the work on its own doesn't stand well, but like I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of reading this, if not like as it was coming out, but like reading it all collected together and reading it alongside other things and knowing that those were all like concurrent stories and stuff. Because Steve, you told me about this. Like, there's an issue in the Daredevil run where like Jessica Jones is like hired as security, and the closest they get to like actually interacting is she's just standing out the door of Nelson and Murdoch or some shit like that.
Oh yeah. So there's actually this like beautiful like month or this period for like year of comics in the early 2000s where Bendis was simultaneously writing Ultimate Spider-Man, Alias, Daredevil. I think New Avengers had started at that point. If not, he was doing something with Avengers. He might have been doing Disassembled, but he was doing all of that at once. And there was like this issue of Daredevil and an issue with Jessica Jones that came out on the same month, where basically what it was is Matt's being investigated at the time for being Daredevil. He's got outed by the tabloids, and he's suing the journal that published the news as slander. And so there's like a bunch of paparazzi all the time everywhere. And his cover story is, well, I can't possibly be Daredevil. I'm blind, but look at all these paparazzi everywhere. I'm going to hire a bodyguard to kind of like take heat off to make it look like I'm vulnerable, yada yada. Like he's playing the lawyer thing. He's playing up the blindness and stuff. And if you read the Daredevil issue, he's inside of his office having a conversation about this with his cast. And if you read the Jessica Jones issue, she's hired to do this, and she's standing outside the door talking to Luke Cage the entire time. And they never actually they interact in the issue insofar as to acknowledge that she's standing outside his door, but they're happening at the same time, literally 5 feet apart from each other in 2 separate books.
Yeah, see, like that's really cool and neat to know about, like in context, and there's stuff like that in John's Green Lantern that comes to mind. Like I remember I swear, anytime I think of this panel, I just think of Jeff Johns like nutting himself as he wrote it, because he's like, oh, it's gonna be so good. Where there's like a scene with the Guardians where they're all talking about like the implications for the universe and all the kinds of bad things that are coming. And then like all at once there's just one panel where all of them say 52. And that was like in the lead up to fucking Crisis and all that shit. I just think about like Jeff Johns fucking creaming himself writing that one fucking panel of all the Guardians say 52. Oh, but like that's, you know, it's one thing to think about that and acknowledge it in the thing, but at the other time, like, if I'm just reading Green Lantern and I'm not reading other stuff or planning to read like Crisis or know that Crisis is coming, if I'm just reading it, I get to that panel, I'm like, the fuck is going on here? So I think that like there's that at the time, or reading it collectively, knowing all the other things that were going on when it was being published, helps to kind of sell you on it and get you into it further. Is just the thought I had about it.
There's definitely, and in part because of the publication history and how long like this particular book has been in the works, there is definitely a part of it that feels like your favorite TV show got canceled and 10 years later they got optioned for like a miniseries, like Twin Peaks: The Return or something like that, where this book, it has to come out in the way it does and on a certain level be a thing that stands on its own. But as far as Bendis is concerned, this is kind of like Alfie said, it's the last 8 issues of his run. And in his mind, he said in interviews that he says this is canon. It's canon in the way that like this is where Daredevil goes, this is where the Marvel Universe goes, this is the end of his story and where it has to finalize. And Tom King's again a really good comparison, because Tom King and Bendis both point to Dark Knight Returns when talking about their respective books, and I get what they mean, because they mean a book so influential and so much about themselves that it's worthy of becoming canon as far as like the lexicon of people talking about comics. That Dark Knight Returns is canon in the sense that everyone knows Dark Knight Returns. But that's not what either of those books really are. They're not Dark Knight Returns in that way. They're 2 books that are very clearly canon endings to their runs and nothing else. And so like Batcat can't really take place in the day-to-day of the DC universe, and End of Days can't take place in the day-to-day of the Marvel universe. But if you read Tom King Batman or Bendis Daredevil, this is the finale. This is where everything will go, and you can either choose to take the baton pass to Brubaker in timeline A, or you can choose this path, which is what they consider to be the legitimate ending. And so it's hard to talk about this book with people as like the perfect standalone Daredevil story like Man Without Fear or even Born Again can be, because this is very much everything that we've set up and seeded and done with the characters is being paid off in this way. Tim, who becomes Daredevil at the end of this, is in the very first arc of Bendis' run. Like I said earlier, Bendis recaps his own run for you in the first issue when he talks about Milla and Matt becoming the Kingpin of New York City. There's a lot of callbacks to the bullseye. The scar on his head is a tie-in to the movie, and in the issue where Bullseye shows up in the Bendis run, he breaks into Matt's house while he's in bed with his wife at the time, and then he throws him out the window and they have like a fist brawl in the alley, and he basically tells Bullseye that you're nothing, you're worthless, yada yada. And like the version of Bullseye you're reading here is clearly the Bendis movie influenced Colin Farrell Bullseye, not the comic book Bullseye.
Or
like
magic.
the canon Bullseye.
Oh,
Exactly. Like,
I miss him
it's
so
that
much.
Bullseye.
Best
Echo
version of
is a
a
major
fucking
character,
nobody character.
Oh yeah, no, it's fucking great. Echo is a major character in that run, and she's got her own stuff lately, but this is the Bendis version of that character. It's not the canon version of it. I don't remember if Frank Castle ever shows up in the main run, so maybe this is why he's so heavily in this one is because he didn't get a chance to use him. But even Purple Man, like Bendis is the guy that reinvented Purple Man to be actually really terrifying, and so he gives him an end here.
Oh, good times. Fucking Purple Man. Oh. I watched the Jessica Jones show that introduced me to Purple Man. I'm like, fuck, I made that character. Shit. Someone else used my really, really good superpower. That's just fucking terrifying. Yeah. I don't know, it's interesting. I feel bad because I realize I probably shouldn't like Frank Castle. Like, he's just such a fascinating character, but, like, he's just become so, like, tainted and probably not the kind of character that should be left around, but goddamn if I don't like him almost every time I read him, you know? It's kind of bad, but I can't help it. So he's
likable in this.
Yeah, he's so good in this, where he's just like, you know, like it shows up, he's like, I'm a dead end. If you're coming to me, you're out of shit. I just fucking love it. Like, fucking goes into Purple Man's office. Purple Man's dead. Frank Castle. Shh.
My favorite bit is, like, because I did not see that, you know, Castle is going to be who he was talking to, that they're, like, going through all these, like, oh yeah, there's like 8 inches of glass between you and him. Don't stand up. Don't do anything. Don't hand him a piece of paper. I'm just like, oh, this must be some, like, fucking superpowered dude who, like, could escape very easily if given the chance. It's just a fucking guy. Fucking Punisher. Like, I'm just like, this is like Batman levels of, like, if you had Bruce Wayne captured and you knew he was Batman, like, that's the same fucking level of shit you'd have, and he still escapes. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with all of that. I think Punisher it's unfortunate, like, what has happened to Punisher in our, like, modern popular culture, but as a character in this story, super happy every time he shows up. Even near the end when, like, Timmy's in the gym and he's, like, training, and he's like, oh, that was the final words that he said, and he's like, yup. Do you know what it means? Yup. he's just fun. I really like him in this a lot.
You got the good drugs.
yeah, it's so good. And then he's just fucking like, what is he? He's just like, stay on the straight or I'll gut ya. It's so fucking good. So he's very much an enjoyable presence in this story.
I felt your presence.
That's part of the fun too, is that you get to see versions of these characters that even if Bendis didn't write them, they exist at, like, a certain kind of time capsule, and I wish I could go back to them. Like, I missed this Punisher. Even though Bendis is the one that created his replacement, I miss just straight up Infinity Formula Nick Fury. I think it's kind of legitimately entertaining when, like, he's just hanging out in the alley and Nick Fury's like, look, I can't actually tell you anything, but I thought I'd tell you to your face that I can't tell you anything. And then Yurik dies, and then he's like, well, I guess I fucked up, and now that it doesn't matter, I guess I could tell you.
I like that he does the same trick twice.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like,
It's
it's the
great.
same. It's so good. And I don't know what Nick Fury's deal is. Like, I know there's, like, mentions that, like, there's not really a shield anymore. There's not really this, that, and the other. So I just kind of gleaned that, like, clearly Nick Fury is not doing the things that, you know, he is typically associated with doing. But having not known what was going on in Marvel at this time, I'm just like, I don't know why the fuck Nick Fury is here or any of this, but he is entertaining.
Why the fuck is Nick Fury white?
Damn, they made Nick Fury white.
Hey, I'm not
DC
that
really
basic,
fucked
man.
up.
Thank you, Alfie. Oh.
I enjoy Samuel L. Jackson being Samuel L. Jackson with an eye patch, but Ultimate Nick Fury is just nowhere near as interesting as main universe Nick Fury.
Steve's racism comes out
I
again.
am totally
I'm
racist.
glad we got-
I'm sorry.
All
I'm
right,
sorry.
boys, we
The
got that
character
one full
designed to
game.
be played
Okay.
by a very specific actor is not interesting compared to the one that has decades of history. That's all I'm saying.
All I'm hearing is racist, racism, racist. So, book him, boys.
I look, if I get canceled over my opinions on Nick Fury, I would actually be kind of proud of myself. Because of all the things that I could be canceled over, liking the white Nick Fury better is not one of them.
There is something special.
Do it, Steve. Tweet it out.
I legitimately like Nick Fury a lot. Nick Fury is a consummate Bendis character that Bendis does nothing with, which always frustrates me because I feel like he would write such a good Nick Fury.
Steve.
And he does for the 2 scenes he's in this book.
Steve, fucking tweet it. At rightish and fucking what's his face. Do it. Say, I don't care if I get canceled for this.
How much I like the white Nick Fury.
Yeah, I don't care if I get canceled for this. Black Nick Fury was a mistake.
He was. I'm sorry, he was.
not
Black Nick
racist,
Fury
but-
is cool in the Ultimate Universe because he's just comic book Samuel L. Jackson. Then they made Samuel L. Jackson, and it got dull and boring.
Nah, it's fine. It's good. I like Nick Fury. I like all Nick Furies. I think all Nick Furies matter.
I think only one specific Nick Fury matters.
Oh man.
But yeah, no, the constant cameos of the other various Marvel characters in this are interesting. I like seeing where Daredevil's various relationships have ended up, and that they are all actually much happier now. Foggy has moved on and become far more successful. Elektra's got a kid and gotten out of the assassin life. Echo's a fucking university teacher. Milla's married and has a kid. Like, everyone's happy. Everyone's doing great. It was Matt Murdock that was the problem the whole time.
I mean, I think the one that you guys are talking about that's really funny is he just... Yeah, this is Marvel in the future. Peter Parker marries Kitty Pryde.
Yeah, I fucking love that callback.
It's a very much a Bendis. Do you get at the fans to get a reaction for that one? Because that's specifically like that. That's a different fucking universe entirely where they date it. But he's just throwing it in there because he loves riling people up. I gotta hand him that.
He even made that relationship in Ultimate to give you the point that this is not a good couple, and then people hated it so much and missed the point so much that now he just owns it.
Yeah, he's living for it. He's living for the smoke.
I fucking love it. I love Peter Parker and Kitty Pryde. I don't care.
You're wrong. You first racism. Now not even the gospel of love is allowed. Oh my god. This man's dead now. Steve
Kitty
Baxi.
Pryde and Peter Parker all the way.
That's what I'm saying.
I guess one character we haven't talked much about in this is Tim, who, like, I guess it's nice having the context that, like, he's a character that was there at the beginning of the run, and, like, because, goddamn, that was probably the thing for me that threw me off the most, of just, like, so why the fuck is it this kid? Like, Ben Urich's son. Yeah, you'll be my replacement. What? Why? So knowing that it's like a character that exists and that Ben Urich's actually like the adopted father or whatever, I think that certainly helps. It was just that was kind of that's helpful information, but that was kind of funny just out of context.
They do a really cool thing with him, where, and I mentioned earlier that Daredevil's basically the poor man's Spider-Man, but they do a lot of like really overt parallels between the new Daredevil and Spider-Man. Nick Fury makes the joke about his Uncle Ben when he gets his first big reveal. It's a Amazing Fantasy cover homage. When immediately after that scene, after Ben Urich wakes up in the hospital, he quotes the great power, great responsibility thing in the hospital bed with Tim. It's interesting like how much they're setting up the new Daredevil to be like Spider-Man in this universe or in this finale. And I think that's interesting because if you take away the kind of like toxicity that is Matt Murdock, the kind of person you are left over with is essentially a Spider-Man clone, which is both what Daredevil used to be before Frank Miller and concurrently kind of what Mark Waid's Daredevil was.
Yeah, that's interesting. I liked the reveal for him. I like the way that he's, you know, kind of incompetent a little bit, in that, you know, he's new way, and it's also got that kind of darker thing, because he lets what was his name, Bullet, die or whatever. I'm not sure if he lets Bullet die or he kills him. What the context for that is.
I think the implication is just one of those kind of like, he was in a dangerous situation already, but he didn't stop him, kind of thing. Like, I don't have to save you type morality. Is I think what the implication is there, because the implication is meant to be like, he's gonna change his ways, but right now he's kind of like figuring shit out, and like he's got that kind of like, well, why do I have to save him? He's a bad guy, like very like naive look on things.
Okay.
And again, kind of Spider-Manning that up too, where Peter lets someone die in his first little adventure. And very similar to that, where this kid fucks up in his initial Daredeviling, that causes Ben to die in the same way Peter fucking up in his initial Spider-Manning causes Uncle Ben to die.
So yeah, I think that's pretty good. I like the moment where he burns the Mapone file. I thought that was really, really good and really, really cool. And I really wish that was the last we saw of it. I really, really wish that she hadn't been named Mapone. I really, really wish that we didn't get that photograph at the end with her. I thought that was like, I'm not sure how to phrase it. I thought that was not committing to the conceit enough. Like, I thought it was a really good character moment to have no true answer given for anybody. And to have Frank Castle's assessment of it be, that just has to be enough. And then you just, those last couple pages give it to you, and you know, you spent the whole book building it up, and really any answer isn't satisfactory at that point. And so I was kind of disappointed to get an answer, honestly.
I kind of agree with that. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing in stories where we build up something and then we don't, as the audience, we don't necessarily get the answer, because by the end of the story, it becomes less important than what the character has gone through. You know, the real answer was the character arcs we made along the way, as it were. And it's interesting to me because, like, Punisher has that line where, you know, he's like, what does it mean or whatever, and he's like, it's guilt, you know. And so when you recontextualize it, you know, you're basically saying that Daredevil felt guilt for dying and leaving Mapone. But then at the same time, I'm just like, he's got like 7 kids. Why is he feeling guilty about that one?
That's the girl.
That's the girl. And I'm also not totally sure I understand what about that makes Bullseye want to kill himself, unless the idea is that he is signaling to Bullseye that there will always be a Daredevil, and so you've only had a symbolic victory here, if anything, and that's maybe what does it. I don't know. I'm a little thrown by that.
On that one, I think, again, I think the strength of the Bullseye thing might be closer to what you and Ian would want, where we don't get a definitive answer on that one. But my reading of that has always been that Matt's final fuck you to Bullseye is, I got to be happy and have a family, and you couldn't stop me. Ha! And that makes Bullseye kill himself, because he like the idea that Matt had a daughter, Matt had a child, Matt had someone that he'd think of in his dying moments to kind of have peace. That's like the ultimate insult to Bullseye, who's like, again, he's got this like Lex Luthor Reverse Flash level obsession with Daredevil, of like needing to ruin everything a part of his life. It's what he defines himself by. So once Matt had happiness and then died in peace, then Bullseye has nothing. So then he needs to kill himself, because he can't win anymore. Because
maybe I would have got that if I had a little bit more history with those two.
Yeah. But again, that's not me being like, oh, this is what happened. That's just my reading of it. It is very,
Yeah,
very
but that does make sense for sure. I don't know the relationship that they have necessarily. So I feel like that read definitely lends itself when you're a little bit more familiar with that history. Which is probably.
I just want to hold Steve's feet to the fire because I remember like Steve's complaint forever about fucking like Interstellar is, oh well, I guess he's real sad about his daughter but doesn't give a shit about his son. So Steve, I guess Matt Murdock's real sad about his daughter but he doesn't give a shit about his sons.
No, he doesn't. No, I agree with Alfie about the Bullseye thing because you also have Bullseye in his last moments like constantly hiring out prostitutes to dress like Elektra, and he murdered Elektra. He also murdered Karen Page, and his whole thing has been to systematically just like ruin Matt Murdock's life at every possible instance, and he's obsessed with his old victories. And so at the end, when Matt like drops the bomb that like there will be that he had a life and that he had a child, and Bullseye can't take it because no matter how much he takes away from him, he still seems to get something back, and it just drives him nuts. I like that a lot, but I also, to your point, Ian, I also like how Matt Murdock being a shitty dad to the rest of his illegitimate children is actually like squared in this story, because Frank Castle has that line where he says the thing is guilt, and Matt goes out of his way to train Tim, who's Ben Urich's adopted kid, but he still he chooses to have a relationship with Ben Urich's kid, and to cut off Ben at the same time. He chooses to have a relationship with one child and then not others. He chooses to use certain women and not others, and that Matt's biggest problem is that he chooses to be happy on certain levels, but he does that in a very sort of controlling and manipulative way. And so he thinks he's being courageous, and he thinks he's being happy, and he thinks he's being honest by saying that, like, no, I love my daughter and I love Natasha and will train my replacement. But all of those things are just closely guarded secrets that he's maintaining, so he doesn't have to deal with all the other shitty things that he refuses to acknowledge, like his other children and all the other women whose lives he has absolutely ruined, that are all much happier without him. And so there's a truth to what Frank says, where he says it's guilt, because it's quintessential to Daredevil, where he has that one moment of solace that's built on a foundation of being a shitty person or having shitty relationships and shitty coping mechanisms everywhere else. And so he throws Foggy under the bus, he throws Milla, he throws Echo, Typhoid Mary, like all of Elektra, all of these women, he did not give to what he gave to this one other one, and that's the guilt. But at the same time, there is an element of solace to it, that he maybe did learn his lesson at the end, and then he goes out that way. And it's for us to decide whether or not Matt Murdock at the end had a fulfilling life, or if he ever actually learned his lesson.
What's the name of the Frank Miller book that I read for Daredevil? It's not like his run. It's the one he did well after it, where it's like an origin piece kind of.
Man Without Fear.
Yeah, that one. I just really like to, like, as I read this, and Elektra's a fucking soccer mom, literally, and she's like, well, ask his mom if you can come. And I like to think back to fucking Man Without Fear, where Elektra is like, I'll taunt him to chase me through the park, and I'll leave my panties behind for him to find. Like, I'm really contrasting those two versions of Elektra in my mind.
Hey, we all have wild teen years. Settle down.
yeah. It's just so funny because she's like, the one time I screw up and allow myself a moment of weakness, you follow me. And she's just like got her long ass nails in his back. I really enjoyed that scene, that Elektra just turns on the crazy bitch mode in like the flip of a switch. Is really good to me. Has everyone else here dated their Elektra? I dated my Elektra.
Oh yeah.
I exclusively date Elektras.
Yeah, Matt really is Daredevil. I'm Spider-Man. In terms of the love life.
Oh man, it's good.
I've been happily married for a few years now, so I don't know what y'all is talking about.
You never had an Elektra?
Reed Richards.
I dated a dude version of Elektra in high school. It's probably the closest I got.
That counts. I'm trying to think what the male equivalent of Elektra is.
Electro.
No. Not bad, but no.
Oh god, that would have been amazing.
Anyway, do we have anything else we want to talk about with this one, or do we want to go ahead and wrap up?
It's good.
We can wrap up.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do ratings. I'll go first, and I'll give this 7 out of 8 issues until the hand shows up.
Son of a bitch.
I will give it, let's think here, 4 out of 5. Fuck, man, I don't know. 4 out of 5. Kingpin's getting beat to death against a fire hydrant.
I'll give this 5 out of 5 redheaded bastard children.
Oh man,
You son of a bitch.
there's a bunch of them.
Are there actually 5 redheaded
Yeah, that
bastard
might be
children?
all of them.
I think there's 5, yeah.
Not mine. I'm so mad.
'Cause there's the 2 twins, there's Milla, there's Electra's, and then there's Natasha. Yeah, so I think there's exactly 5.
There you go. 5 out of 5 redheaded bastard children.
Me, again, I think this is just incredible, and it's definitely something that I.
Matt Murdock, wear a fucking condom challenge.
Yeah, exactly. It never will. It never will. He pretends not to see it. Exactly.
Matt Murdock doing the fucking Anchorman 2 scene. I got up and I wanted to masturbate, and I spent half an hour stroking and stroking, and it turned out it was just my thigh I was stroking the whole time because I'm blind. Wouldn't you? Sorry, Alfie.
It's
Sorry.
okay. No, I wanted to get that out there. But for me, again, this is something great. Definitely, I'd say read the Bendis run first before you read it to get the best effect. But even if you do end up just picking this out and stuff, it's still a really good read because the story is so strong. So I'm gonna give this 5 out of 5 Hulk musicals that still had more health and safety than Spider-Man Turn After Dark.
Oh man.
Oof.
Did they ever make Did we ever get a bootleg tape of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark? I might have to ask Lo about that. She
Has to
did
be.
one.
Yeah,
It
I'd
has
love
to
to see
be.
it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, whose turn is it next week? Is it yours, Alfie?
Yeah, it might be, but we also got a request from a special guest star, so we maybe want to hit them up first and ask if they have a specific topic.
A special guest star, huh?
From a rounds of plug deck.
Oh.
I don't remember this at all, but yeah, sure, fuck it.
Okay, sure.
Just making decisions without you in the GC.
That's
Okay.
me. That's how I live.
That's
But yeah,
fine. No, I was just surprised.
If not though, I'll come up with a topic instead for that. But TBD.
Okay.
Swear to
our
God,
topic
if he
is
makes
TBD.
me talk about some fucking Dragon Ball ass bullshit.
You're damn right. You'd be
Matt,
lucky
you're
to
the-
do so.
Matt, you're lucky we haven't
love
made you
talking
talk about
about
some
Dragon
fucking
Ball
Dragon Ball ass bullshit.
Yeah, that's 100% fair. The fact that I have not had to talk about Dragon Ball in this fucking show is a testament.
Yeah, no, we're gonna
You're
fucking do
right.
that. Everyone else picked Dragon Ball topics exclusively for like the next month.
The month of Dragon Ball begins.
Oh God.
Yeah, alright. Everyone, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of illegitimate children.
I am the Daredevil erotica lover, of which there's a bunch.
He's got a real breeding fetish. And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.